Captain Xylox of the Rurik Empire strode into the high-vaulted observation deck, his claws clinking rhythmically against the polished hypercrystal tiles. The hum of analytical machines, filled with biostatic data and extensive behavioral graphs, surrounded him. The air was dense with excitement, and the faint, metallic tang of ozone signifying something truly momentous had occurred. Report, Grizzit Ilox barked. His orange eyes glowed with a mix of anticipation and predatory satisfaction. The Rurik were known across the quadrant for their unparalleled efficiency and ruthless intellect. Anything that promised a decisive advantage over their galactic rivals was treated as a treasure beyond measure. Grizzit, the lead xenobiologist, nervously adjusted his spectrovisor. A jittery being with lavender scales and a tendency to sweat profusely under pressure, he flicked a glance toward the containment chamber's transparent walls. "Captain," he began, his voice quivering, "it is ready." Xylox strode forward, his cloak billowing. He pressed his palm to the scanner, granting access. With a hiss, the outer barrier of the containment chamber slid aside, revealing the sleekest, deadliest thing the Rurik had ever attempted to clone. It was small, it was furry, and it was currently curled into a tight ball, purring loudly as it napped. "Behold," Grizzit announced, attempting a tone of grandiosity, though his anxiety cracked through. "The apex predator, extracted from deep reconnaissance operations on planet 4G73. Referred to by the dominant species as Earth. This particular specimen, based on human logs, was named Mr. Whiskers." Captain Xylox squinted at the gray-furred feline. It yawned, exposing tiny, needle-sharp teeth, then resumed snoring. Grizzit Xylox said, after a long pause, "This, is it? The deadliest creature." Grizzit swallowed, nodding frantically. "Yes, Captain. According to human logs, this particular cat outmaneuvered, outsmarted, and occasionally maimed its way through complex environmental simulations, defeating other species considered dangerous by human standards." HFY, Xylox murmured. It seems unimpressive. He tapped on the containment wall, causing the cat to twitch but otherwise remain steadfastly asleep. "Wake it." Grizzit pulled out a small rod and pressed a button. A low-frequency pulse emitted into the chamber. Mr. Whiskers' ears flicked. His eyes snapped open, two pools of molten green focused with a gaze so intense that the aliens present all leaned back reflexively. With one fluid motion, Mr. Whiskers sprang to his feet. It happened quickly. One of the lower-ranked scientists, a gangly being named Polt, suddenly sneezed, his elongated nose vibrating. The noise triggered something in Mr. Whiskers, whose pupils dilated, becoming dark voids. Without hesitation, he launched himself at the glass barrier, claws extended. Captain Xylox barely had time to blink before Polt was screaming, scrambling to move as Mr. Whiskers somehow phased through the containment field, using a combination of claws, cunning, and a burst of unexplainable feline physics. The furry projectile landed on Polt's face, attaching itself like a living, hissing mask. "Get it off," Polt shrieked, stumbling backward. He tripped over his elongated legs and crashed into a cart of volatile chemicals. Beakers and containment pods shattered. Green fumes rose, causing nearby consoles to spark and explode. Xylox observed with growing alarm. "Grizzit," he said with forced calm, "what exactly is it doing?" Grizzit frantically flipped through data logs. "I believe it is. Asserting dominance, Captain." "Assert faster," Polt wheezed, now rolling on the floor as Mr. Whiskers transitioned to batting at Polt's ears with focused malice. With a hiss of mechanical doors, a squad of Rurik enforcers stormed in, weapons drawn. "Secure the subject," one bellowed. They fired immobilizing nets, but Mr. Whiskers was faster. With an acrobatic flip, he leapt from Polt, clawed his way up a wall, and dropped onto an enforcer's head. Yowling with fury, the cat unleashed a flurry of scratches, blinding the enforcer's third eye, and sending him crashing into a control panel. Sparks flew. Alarms blared. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, locking everyone inside. Captain Grizzit said, his voice high-pitched from terror, "Containment protocols have failed. Mr. Whiskers is loose." "That much is clear," Xylox snapped. He assessed the room enforcers incapacitated, Polt whimpering on the floor, and Mr. Whiskers now perched atop a broken console, tail twitching like a metronome of doom. All personnel, stand down. Do not engage. The enforcers froze. Mr. Whiskers' eyes swept over them, as if weighing each being's worth against a cosmic scale of judgment. For a long, tense moment, no one dared breathe. Then Mr. Whiskers meowed a delicate, tinkling sound. It was horrifying. 2 weeks later, Rourke High Command was a shadow of its former self. Meetings were held with hushed voices. Guards walked in pairs, always glancing over their shoulders. The cat had escaped its initial containment chamber, prowling the labyrinthine corridors of the flagship with impunity. Every attempt to trap, subdue, or understand it had ended in disaster. A report lay in front of Xylox. He rubbed his temple as he read aloud. Third unit has been completely neutralized. 14 casualties from stealth claw strikes. Communications array sabotaged. Mr. Whiskers appears to have identified weak spots and eliminated them. Grizzit, now sporting bandages over his once perfect lavender scales, nodded. The creature's tactical acumen defies explanation. Humans must have genetically engineered it to perfection. Xylox scoffed. Nonsense. It is too small to be their apex predator. He squinted at another report, detailing how the cat had single-pawed the destruction of the starship's gravity stabilizers, resulting in 5 hours of zero-G chaos. Yet it is undeniably effective. Grizzit leaned closer. Captain, I've gathered further data. Earth humans appear to be subservient to such creatures. Entire sections of their recorded history revolve around placating and entertaining them. This cat may not merely be a predator, but a ruler. Are you suggesting humans worship these things? Xylox demanded. Effectively, yes. Xylox shuddered. That makes them all the more dangerous. We must prepare for. Captain shouted. A guard from the corridor, charging in with his uniform in tatters. It has the energy core. Everyone gasped. Xylox leapt from his seat. By the scales of Korneke, if it detonates the core. The guard shook his head frantically. No, it isn't trying to destroy it. It's playing with it, batting it across the floor like a toy. The room fell silent as they processed this new horror. A being so powerful it used the essence of their starship's power as a mere amusement. Grizzit, Xylox whispered, feeling faint. Can it be stopped? Grizzit hesitated. Only one being might influence it. We need the human, the one it originally belonged to. Lars, a human of average height with shaggy brown hair and an easy smile, looked utterly out of place as he was escorted into the Rourke flagship by armed guards. Despite the severity of the situation, he had taken it in stride largely because he assumed this was some elaborate prank. That assumption was beginning to unravel as he noted the scorched walls, broken doors, and trembling aliens. So, Lars began, scratching his head. Someone mind explaining why I got pulled out of my bed and teleported into wherever this is? Xylox stepped forward. You are Lars, owner of the creature called Mr. Whiskers. Yeah? Wait, is this about him? Did he scratch someone again? I'm so sorry if he did. He's a menace. The assembled aliens stared. Did you say? Menace. Yeah, Lars said, shrugging. I mean, he steals food, knocks over plants, and once headbutted a fire alarm. What did he do this time? Captain Xylox's voice cracked. He has brought this ship to its knees. Lars blinked, then burst out laughing. Mr. Whiskers? Oh, come on. That's hilarious. You guys must be messing with me. Grizzit pushed forward a trembling holographic recording. It depicted Mr. Whiskers tearing through a squad of elite enforcers, moving with uncanny speed and precision. Lars paled. Oh, wow. He really hates uniforms. We need you to control him, Xylox said, desperation creeping into his tone. Before it is too late. Lars glanced around. Yeah, sure, I can try. But you got any snacks? He responds better if he's bribed. The Rourke scurried about with a mix of urgency and panic as they assembled what they presumed to be snacks. To the Rourke, who were unfamiliar with human cuisine, this translated to a bizarre spread of gelatinous blue cubes, spiky mineral wafers, and one suspiciously pulsating orb that Grizit claimed was a delicacy. Lars inspected the offerings and shook his head. "Yeah, none of this is going to cut it," he said. "You got anything meaty? Or fish, maybe?" Grizit flared his nostrils. "Fish." "Yup." Mr. Whiskers goes wild for tuna? Captain Xylox clenched his jaw. "You speak of this, tuna, as if it holds the power to pacify a god. What is it?" Lars scratched the back of his neck. It's a fish. Pretty normal on Earth, like small, swims in the ocean. You really don't know what tuna is." The Rourke exchanged bewildered glances. After a tense pause, Grizit announced, "Dispatch a retrieval unit to Earth immediately. If tuna is key to containing this creature, we shall acquire it at all costs." Xylox, who had begun pacing in agitation, snapped, "We do not have time. Mr. Whiskers has the energy core. If he destabilizes it, this entire vessel and possibly the surrounding solar system will be reduced to dust. We must act now." Lars raised a calming hand. All right, let's not freak out. I'll go talk to him." He turned toward the corridor, then paused. "You might want to stay back. Mr. Whiskers can be touchy." As Lars approached the engineering sector, signs of chaos grew more pronounced. The once gleaming hallways were gouged by claw marks, and half the light fixtures dangled from sparking wires. Lars spotted scorch marks and what looked suspiciously like a half-melted robot limb. In the center of the wreckage sat Mr. Whiskers, eyes glowing with mischief as he batted the ship's energy core, a shimmering, pulsating orb of incredible power from paw to paw. Each swipe sent tiny arcs of energy cascading around the room, causing nearby consoles to explode in showers of sparks. "Hey buddy," Lars called softly, crouching low. "What you got there?" The cat's head whipped around, eyes narrowing. Lars chuckled nervously. He recognized that look, the one Mr. Whiskers gave right before he lunged at a new roll of toilet paper. "Easy there," Lars continued. "How about you give that back? I've got some treats for you." Mr. Whiskers tilted his head, considering. Then, in a display of supreme feline disinterest, he casually pushed the energy core off the edge of the control panel. The orb tumbled toward the ground, pulsing more erratically with every passing second. "Catch it," Xylox screamed from the observation deck. Lars dove forward, arms outstretched. By some miracle, or by the chaotic favor of cat gods, he managed to catch the core, just inches before it hit the floor. As he lay there, cradling the volatile object, Mr. Whiskers jumped onto his back, kneading his spine with surprising force. "Ow, okay, you win," Lars wheezed. He carefully placed the energy core on a nearby pedestal and twisted around to face his feline overlord. "You really need to cut this out, buddy." Mr. Whiskers responded by biting Lars's hand. Hard. "Ow," Lars yelped, shaking his hand loose. "Yeah, I missed you too." Captain Xylox's voice crackled over the intercom. "Have you pacified it?" "Sort of," Lars replied. He grimaced as Mr. Whiskers batted his hand, clearly expecting something. "Seriously, do you guys not have any fish? Anything remotely fish-shaped?" "We have prepared a substitute," Grizit said, breathless. Moments later, 2 Rourke guards arrived, wheeling in a peculiar contraption. It was a mechanical fish roughly the size of a large dog crafted hastily from spare ship parts. Its metal body glimmered, and its eyes were small laser diodes. As it powered on, the fish's tail wagged with a clanking noise. Mr. Whiskers stared, fascinated. Then he launched himself at it. "Is that safe?" Lars asked nervously as sparks flew from the fish's metal hide under the cat's frenzied onslaught. Grizit hesitated. "Define safe." A blinding explosion answered for him. The mechanical fish detonated, showering the room in bits of metal and circuitry. Mr. Whiskers emerged from the wreckage unharmed, fur fluffed up and eyes wide with wild glee. He began batting at a loose spring. Lars groaned. "You just made it worse. Congratulations." Back in the command center, Xylox slumped into his chair. "Clearly, physical containment is impossible. We must employ psychological warfare." Grizit brightened. "Brilliant, Captain. We can demoralize it." Lars snorted. "Demoralize a cat? You'd have better luck convincing water not to be wet. Undeterred, the Rourke proceeded with their next scheme, a massive holographic field designed to simulate a world devoid of corners, ledges, and places to hide. The logic was sound without obstacles. The cat would be denied its favorite ambush tactics. Mr. Whiskers, however, simply lay down in the middle of the holographic field, stretched luxuriously, and fell asleep. Lars clapped slowly. Good job. Now he's resting. You just gave him more energy to cause mayhem later. Captain Xylox's eyes twitched. There must be a solution. Well, Lars suggested cautiously, have you tried just being nice to him? Silence fell. Xylox exchanged a glance with Grizzit, who appeared scandalized. Nice. Xylox spat the word like a curse. This creature has annihilated countless systems, shredded our best enforcers, and destabilized our most precious power source. And you want us to pet it? Pretty much, yeah. Reluctantly, Captain Xylox approached Mr. Whiskers. The cat opened one eye lazily, its gaze heavy with judgment. Lars mimed petting gestures. Gently, like this. Xylox extended a trembling claw and touched the fur. Mr. Whiskers purred. I think it is working, Xylox whispered in awe. Encouraged, he scratched behind the cat's ears. The purring intensified, sending vibrations through the floor. Suddenly, alarms blared. Unscheduled power surge detected in Sector 12, a voice shouted. Grizzit paled. It appears. The purring is resonating with our power systems. Mr. Whiskers' contentment had turned into a cascading energy feedback loop, causing power to spike throughout the ship. Consoles exploded. Lights flickered wildly. Systems crashed. Xylox looked betrayed. You said to be nice. To be fair, Lars said sheepishly, ducking as a light fixture fell. I didn't know he'd do that either. As chaos erupted around them, Mr. Whiskers yawned and curled up again, oblivious to the mayhem he had just caused. After 3 hours of frantic repairs, the Rourke leadership convened in a battered conference room. Lars slouched in a chair, Mr. Whiskers curled up in his lap, fast asleep. Human, Xylox said, rubbing his temples, we are willing to concede defeat. If you can remove this creature from our ship, we shall grant you anything within our power. Lars grinned. Anything? Well, how about some space tech? And maybe, I dunno, a lifetime supply of alien cat treats. Grizzit coughed. Deal. With surprising efficiency, the Rourke constructed a small, luxurious pod designed for one human and one cat. As Lars prepared for departure, Mr. Whiskers flicked his tail contentedly. The Rourke watched, equal parts relieved and traumatized. Just before the pod launched, Xylox stepped forward. Human Lars.
Yeah.
Xylox hesitated. Is there any advice you can offer should we encounter another of your cats? Lars pondered this. Yeah, just remember, you don't own a cat. A cat owns you. Good luck with that. With that, the pod launched, carrying the deadliest creature the Rourke had ever known and the only human capable of keeping it entertained far from their beleaguered ship. When Mr. Whiskers finally tired himself out and fell into a deep slumber, Lars reclined in his seat, sighing in relief. Space, he murmured, it's not so bad with a furry little tyrant by your side. Back on the Rourke flagship, Captain Xylox made a silent vow never, ever again would they underestimate Earth's creatures. The journey back to Earth was surprisingly uneventful for a time. Mr. Whiskers, now sated and tuckered out, was curled on Lars's lap, occasionally twitching in his sleep as if chasing an interstellar mouse. The pod, equipped with cutting-edge alien tech, hummed softly as it glided through hyperspace. Well, little buddy, Lars murmured, stroking the cat's fur, you've sure made a name for yourself, huh? Galactic terror. Who knew? He chuckled to himself. It still seemed surreal, even as the events replayed in his mind, the chaos, the panic, the sheer absurdity of aliens being utterly dominated by a housecat. He was certain nobody back home would believe him. Not unless he had some proof. Proof, Lars muttered. His gaze shifted to the console, which was blinking with an incoming communication from the Rourke. Sighing, he accepted it. Captain Xylox's haggard face appeared on the screen. The once proud alien now sported a frazzled, haunted expression, as though he hadn't slept since the departure. Human Lars. Captain Lars greeted casually, as if they were old friends. Miss me already? I would sooner embrace a star's core. Xylox snapped, though exhaustion blunted the edge of his words. We are transmitting the coordinates for a containment facility on an isolated asteroid. It has been fortified with every possible measure to withstand your creature's abilities. Containment facility. Lars raised an eyebrow. For what? Xylox's mouth twitched. For the clones. Clones? What clones? Lars asked, his stomach sinking. He had a very bad feeling about this. The captain's image flickered for a moment, but Lars could hear him muttering something about hubris and the council's folly before he regained composure. The Council of Rurk, in their infinite wisdom, deemed it prudent to create experimental clones of Mr. Whiskers. They believed they could control them. Lars's jaw dropped. You cloned him. Are you insane? In retrospect, yes, Xylox admitted miserably. The clones are unpredictable, each exhibiting unique behaviors that defy logic. 2 have already escaped containment. 1 discovered how to disable our cloaking systems, while the other reprogrammed our entire fleet to play lullaby of destruction on repeat. Lars's brain struggled to process the idiocy and audacity of it all. Why didn't you tell me this before I left? We hope to avoid further embarrassment, Xylox said grimly. But the clones must be neutralized. You are, regrettably, the universe's foremost expert on the original specimen. Not by choice, Lars muttered. He glanced down at Mr. Whiskers, who was now pawing at a floating hologram. Fine, I'll help. But you owe me more than fancy cat treats. Anything within reason, Xylox agreed, desperation evident in his eyes. Please hurry. The transmission ended, and Lars slouched in his seat. Great. Just great. You hear that, buddy? We're on cleanup duty. Mr. Whiskers meowed, his tone unmistakably smug. Lars chose to interpret it as, good luck, minion. The pod touched down on the asteroid's fortified surface, greeted by a dozen Rurk guards. Lars stepped out, cradling Mr. Whiskers. The feline surveyed the surroundings with an air of detached superiority. Grizzit approached, visibly relieved. Human Lars, thank the stars you've come. The clones have been causing complications. Complications, Lars asked warily. What exactly are we dealing with? Grizzit gestured toward the containment center, a vast labyrinth of reinforced chambers. The first clone has developed a fixation on lasers. It weaponizes any light source it finds. Okay, Lars said slowly. So it's a cat with a laser obsession. That's not too bad. And the second, Grizzit continued, seems to possess telekinetic abilities. Lars's heart sank. Telekinetic? How? We don't know. Grizzit threw his hands up. It levitates objects, redirects attacks, and manipulates its environment with thought alone. Lars groaned. You cloned Mr. Whiskers and got one with psychic powers. This is a disaster. It is. Suboptimal, Grizzit agreed. Where are they now? Grizzit pointed to a live feed. The screen displayed Clone 1, a gray and white copy of Mr. Whiskers, prancing through a maze of corridors. Every few moments it paused, its eyes locking onto surveillance cameras. Then, with a gleam of unholy glee, it fired concentrated beams of energy, reducing equipment to molten slag. Yeah, that's bad, Lars muttered. The feed shifted to Clone 2, who sat serenely in midair, surrounded by floating debris. It used its telekinetic powers to carve intricate patterns in metal walls. When a brave Rurk enforcer attempted to approach, the clone casually hurled him across the room without lifting a paw. Even worse, Lars said. How do you intend to neutralize them? Grizzit asked, hope mingling with fear. Lars rubbed his temples. I'll talk to them. Lars entered the containment sector, Mr. Whiskers perched on his shoulder. Clone 1, dubbed Laser Whiskers, was busy dismantling a control panel with concentrated beams of light. When it noticed Lars, it paused, ears twitching. Hey, laser whiskers, Lars said, feeling ridiculous. You wanna? Not destroy that? The clone's eyes glowed and a searing beam lanced toward Lars. He dove, barely avoiding it, as Mr. Whiskers leapt from his shoulder with a hiss. The original cat landed gracefully, eyes locked on his clone counterpart. Tension crackled in the air. A laser Whiskers meowed a high-pitched, challenging sound. Mr. Whiskers answered with a low growl. They circled each other, fur bristling. Is this a cat duel? Lars whispered, inching back. Without warning, Laser Whiskers fired another beam. Mr. Whiskers dodged, weaving through the chaos with uncanny reflexes. The clone's beam struck walls and consoles, sending showers of sparks. Lars realized he had to end this quickly before the entire facility was destroyed. Rizit, he yelled into his comm. Activate the laser pointers. A dozen mechanical arms descended, each projecting a small red dot across the floor. Laser Whiskers halted, mesmerized. It tracked every movement with obsessive focus. Now, Mr. Whiskers, Lars urged. The original cat pounced, knocking the clone off balance. In a flurry of fur and claws, the two tangled, rolling across the floor. For a brief, chaotic moment, it was impossible to tell who was who until Mr. Whiskers emerged victorious, standing atop his defeated double. Laser Whiskers lay on its back, eyes swirling with confusion. It meowed softly and went limp. Grizet's voice crackled over the comm. Did it surrender? I think it powered down, Lars replied, scooping up Mr. Whiskers, one down, one to go. The final challenge awaited in a vast chamber, its walls lined with metallic sculptures floating in midair. Clone 2 hovered in the center, eyes closed as if meditating. Lars approached cautiously. All right, telekinetic Whiskers, he called. Let's talk. The clone's eyes snapped open. Everything in the room lifted off the ground, tables, equipment, chunks of the floor itself. Lars felt the hair on his arm stand up as an invisible force gripped him, pulling him upward. Hey, no need for that, he gasped, struggling against the telekinetic grip. Mr. Whiskers, however, had other ideas. He leapt from Lars's arms and swiped at the clone, disrupting its concentration. The objects fell, crashing to the ground as the two cats faced off. Telekinetic Whiskers retaliated, lifting Mr. Whiskers with its mind and spinning him in midair. But Mr. Whiskers hissed defiantly, lashing out with claws that cut through the telekinetic aura. They clashed, their battle a chaotic dance of swipes, leaps, and mind-bending powers. Come on, Mr. Whiskers, Lars cheered. Show that psychic pretender who's boss. The original cat, fueled by determination and possibly spite, broke through the psychic grip. He tackled the clone, pinning it down. Telekinetic Whiskers' eyes dimmed, and it fell limp beneath him. Lars collapsed, exhausted. Is it over? Is it? And the Rourke guards rushed in, scanning the clones. They have been neutralized. Mr. Whiskers strutted over to Lars, tail held high. He meowed triumphantly. Yeah, you're the king, Lars said, scratching his ears. Can we please go home now? Back aboard the Rourke flagship, Lars prepared for the journey home. Xylox and Grizzet approached, their gratitude tempered by exhaustion. Human Lars, Xylox said, you have our eternal thanks. The containment facilities will remain on alert for any future incidents. Good call, Lars replied. He turned to Grizzet. No more clones. Ever. Grizzet nodded fervently. As Lars and Mr. Whiskers boarded their pod, he glanced back at the assembled aliens. You guys really picked the wrong species to mess with. Believe us, Xylox muttered. We are acutely aware. The pod's engines roared to life, carrying Lars and his troublesome companion back toward Earth. Mr. Whiskers purred, content in his role as the galaxy's most dangerous and most pampered predator. Lars reclined, shaking his head with a mix of exasperation and amusement. Next time, buddy, how about we just stay home? And so, for now, peace reigned across the stars. Until the next curious alien decided to tamper with Earth's most fearsome pets.